All right, we're showing you pictures now of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel on Capitol Hill. He is set to meet with some GOP lawmakers later this morning. Obviously, we're keeping an eye out on those developments, given the news that the President of the United States has made this week with his plans, the plans for the United States as it relates to Gaza. And now we're learning that Hamas has responded to the president's plans for the United States to take control of the Gaza Strip. The group says it categorically rejects the idea, as you might imagine. Now it's called on all Palestinians to unite in opposition that has raised concerns that already the fragile ceasefire deal could be on even thinner ice. CBS News national correspondent Ian Lee, who has spent multiple years covering the Middle East, is here in the Studio 55 to talk to me about this. It's good to see you here in New York. Ian, as we've pointed out, you've spent many, many years covering the Middle East, going back to your time even before here at CBS. Just let me get your sense of the reaction of what people in the Palestinian territories might be saying in reaction to what the president is suggesting.
I think there's probably a lot of shock, Vlad. People hearing what the president said. We haven't heard this from the U.S. government before, some proposal like this. So there's a lot of shock in the West Bank and in Gaza, but also of digging in their heels. These are people who are, many of them, descendants of families that fled in 1948 and 1967, their homes. They don't want to make 2025 another year in that list. So there's going to be a lot of resistance to the president's plan.
The president has suggested that countries like Egypt and Jordan could take in the 2 million residents of the Gaza Strip. Both of those countries have signaled that that's impossible, not just because it would present a huge economic burden and strain on their treasuries, but also they wouldn't be able to know whether or not some of the people that were coming in were perhaps potential terrorists.
I've lived in Egypt, I've lived in Jordan, I've been to those borders many times, and I can tell you Egypt actually built the wall and its border fortifications during the war. It doesn't want Gazans on the Sinai Peninsula. Jordan doesn't. They can't handle it. They don't want them. This really does seem, though, like a non-starter. I would be surprised if the White House and Israeli officials are really considering this. It seems a bit shocking to most people, this kind of proposal, but it seems more to me like a negotiating tactic by the Trump administration, knock regional leaders off balance for future negotiations when it comes to the Palestinians and the Israelis. I would be very surprised if anyone in Israel or the White House is really taking this consideration seriously.
I would tend to agree with you, Ian, except that, you've heard Nancy Cordes in our segment earlier suggesting that there are some right-wing Israeli politicians who are in support of this. We know that some of the right-wingers in Israel have long supported the state of Israel annexing the entire Gaza Strip, including even the West Bank. We know that treaties would fall apart. Treaties that exist between Israel and Egypt and Saudi Arabia, those would go by the wayside. So on one hand, I want to be optimistic like you and think to myself, like, this is just a bluff, this is just a tactic. On the other, if there are people who have had this wish for quite some time, and now you've got the backing of the superpower, the United States, why wouldn't you do it?
You're absolutely right. There is a section of Israeli society on the right that would like to see the Gazans leave the Gaza Strip, settlers move in, and they are a very vocal and strong part of Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition. He needs them to stay in power, and that's very important for him right now, especially as he has legal issues. But by and large, if you look at Gaza, it's approximately 1.8 million people. They won't leave, so you'd have to do that by force. Many legal scholars say that if you did that, that would be ethnic cleansing, and it's just really a non-starter. And there are large vocal parts of Israeli society that doesn't want that to happen too. So it does seem like it would be very difficult.
And I just keep thinking to myself that part of the rise of Osama bin Laden and that whole jihadist movement that happened in the late 80s up until 9/11 came about because they felt that Americans were intruding, having boots on the ground in places that they thought were sacred, where Americans should not be. So even though the president is suggesting there won't be American boots on the ground, as you say, it'd be very hard to do without using force.
Absolutely.
All right, Ian Lee, so great to have you here for this context, man. Probably the best conversation I've had this week here in the studio. Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for being here.